When you hear the rhythm, start to move.
Hi everyone, my name is Varia and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about career change. Please do subscribe to this channel if you want to hear stories about how people look for careers they're passionate about. Today my guest is Marc Faubeau. Marc spent more than a decade in traditional finance. He was a sales trader at an investment bank. He was an employee at MarketAxess, which is a super fast-growing top S&P 500 fintech firm. But then, after a number of life events, Marc decided to plunge into entrepreneurship. And then he became a CEO and a co-founder of Project Olympia, an AI company that's bringing video recognition of human behavior and human movement to a number of industries, for example, sports. After a couple of roller coaster years, unfortunately, the company did not survive. But this is not the point. The key point is that Marc finds these 2 years being one of the most rewarding years of his life. And in this interview, I would love to ask him what was these 2 years like and why did they have such an impact on him. So, Marc, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Vara. Very happy to be here. I've been watching the podcast and you've got quality guests and glad I can share my journey with you.
Perfect. So let's start with the time when you were still at MarketAxess and you decided to venture into entrepreneurship. What has prompted you to do it?
Yeah. So it has been a very long process. I think it's something that was always in me. When I was very young, I was super creative. Just the way I was playing, you could give me like a big card box and I was creating armors, I was creating vehicles or whatever, playing with Legos all the time. So it's something that was in me, was this, creativity. And going into finance, spending like 10, 12 years in this industry, we can't say finance is a place where creativity is, stimulated much. And it just happened that at some point after staying more than 5 years in the same company, doing the same job, I loved what I was doing, it was great people, etc. But at some point you're like, okay, there's something else to life. There's something more. And I was really missing not using my, right side of my brain, the creative side. And to the point where I was like, okay, I have to change something.
And how did you think about risks that associated with this move? For example, financial impact of leaving a full-time job that pays you bills every month, or like an opportunity cost whereby you're leaving a stable career behind where you're progressing. How did you think about all of that?
So you don't start by thinking about those risks. The first thing is, for me, one wake-up call. And it's not a pun intended here, but is when I was waking up in the morning and I was every day for quite a few years thinking about what excuse I could call my boss with to call sick. And it was constantly like every single day when I was waking up, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to go. I'm not motivated. I'm not excited. I was well paid. I like the people I was working with, very smart people, driven, etc. But at some point, the job was not exciting anymore. So I started first by looking into the risks of staying rather than the risk of leaving. And then when you start looking at the risk of leaving, you're like, okay, especially when you come from a trading background, you learn how to first look at the maximum risk. So I was like, okay, if I decide to, move on one day and do something else, create something, what is the maximum risk, right? So about it, you think about what would be plan B. If it goes south, everything goes, collapses, then what is my escape plan? But then you have to put that on the side of your brain. Otherwise, you never move, you never do anything. There are risks, obviously. But also, if you don't take them, then you don't evolve and you don't move forward. So I thought about them and quickly moved on and, kept on, decided to build.
And how did you think about your plan B then? So what was your idea of this plan back in the day?
Well, plan B was, I knew I had, good degrees, good, business school. I was fortunate, enough to have a family who helped me to be in a good position, which I appreciate is not the same for everyone. But I knew I had a good profile, a good resume, and if things were not working, then I would just have additional skills that I could put forward and bring to the new company who would understand my profile and who I was. and who I am. So, that was the plan B was, I will just learn something more that I can, transfer and grow from.
And how did others react to your idea to move into entrepreneurship? Were people supportive, or did they tell you to think twice?
So that was a progressive thing because my very close friends, I was in the group, I am in the group, always the one coming with, oh, we should create this, we should do that. Or I did several times attempted to create a company. First time it was something around like social networks, pitched it to an entrepreneur who had made fortune, etc. in creating startups and tech companies. Second idea was about with a friend of mine about AI. So leveraging AI to recognize disease in radiology images. But for some reason, every time there was something that was blocking, that was preventing me from really creating the company. And then, I started the YouTube channel, and we can obviously develop on this later. So it was a progressive process to the point where I was mature enough and I understood what I needed to really finally take this final step of corporate life and first step into entrepreneur.
Right. And other people have kind of seen that you're so passionate about it and kind of got used to it, right?
Yeah. So most of them were not, surprised until the moment I said, oh, I'm resigning. And then they were like, what? You're in a very, well-paid job in finance and you're going into the unknown. And I think that was the main reaction, especially from people who are doing the same type of job, because you take a risk that 90% of the people, if not more, wouldn't take. So it's hard for them to grasp the idea, and they're like, gosh, you might be doing a mistake. Because the first thing people are thinking about sometimes is also the financial aspect, when it's so much more than that. Entrepreneurship is, if you do it to start with for the money, don't do it, right? So yeah, that was some reactions from some of the people were more like, oh, think twice before doing it.
Did it kind of make you hesitate or doubt, or were you so convinced that you kind of disregarded it and it didn't matter?
No, because my view, there's a very good book that I read. I love it. It's called UNSCRIPTED by M.J. DeMarco. And he refers to the script, which is this social condition we grow up in. It comes from your friends, your family, your parents' education that is, reflects on you, also impacts you and drives a little bit your life. So we are being taught from a very young age. It's less and less true now, thanks to social media, YouTube, etc. But it has been true. Our generation, we grew up with this. We didn't grow up with internet, right? It came when we were like 12, 13 years old, something. But the script is you have to work well at school. You've got good grades. If you've got good grades, you can go to an even better school after high school and whatever. If you've got a top uni, then you've got a good job. Once you've got a good job, with this money, you can buy a house or a flat and, have a mortgage and find a wife and a dog and a house. That's the script, right? But no one tells you that don't trade your time for money. Use your time to generate your own money. And if you do so, then you've got time back for yourself. No one takes this like opposite approach. It's all about how can I bring value to a corporate and exchange this value and this time against a salary. But nowadays with social media, etc., we start seeing like a reversal of this trend and this mindset. So I was always in the script for a very long time. When I read this book and other books, I started realizing there's another way. There's another way things could go and could happen. And let me try.
So interesting that it sounds like the motivations for you were your creative side and the motivations for going into entrepreneurship, but also this idea that, okay, like, is it how it should be that I trade my time for money if I can actually create something on my own and then get some time back and do other things, right? All right, so let's go into the time when you have just resigned. what was the vision of Project Olympia back then? How did this vision come about? Can you just tell me a bit more about how you guys thought about this company and its mission?
So leading to the point of where I decided to fully resign, as I said, I attempted to create some companies different times to the point where at some point I was like, okay, I'm tired. There's always something missing for me to fully commit and go and create this company. Sometimes it was, for the social network, the risk was, okay, it requires a lot of capital upfront. And if tomorrow Facebook has the same idea, then, that's over. So let's try to make it, smaller, easier to execute. And I couldn't reduce the idea I had. That was an advice coming from the investor that I pitched to. Second was radiology. I had the idea. We had the technology with my friend who's now an AI dev at Google. So he had the tech. I could come up with the team, etc. I talked to my sister who's a radiologist and her husband, some friends of mine in medicine. But the thing is, I was relying on their knowledge, on their expertise for it to work. And when you're a founder, when you have an idea, it's really hard to find people who are, to start with, as motivated as you and see the big picture and the ambition. So if they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to do this, I didn't have time, then it goes nowhere. Mm-hmm. And when you want to execute on an idea, you have to go fast. So coming to YouTube, I was like, okay, I want to create. I miss it. I feel, miserable right now. I need to create. What can I do to tomorrow create something? And I was like, okay, well, I always loved doing videos. I always loved, taking pictures. What about, I feel I've been studying most of my life, haven't really enjoyed, traveled much or, ticked off my bucket list item. What if I do that and I record it and put it on YouTube? And that's how the creative process really started for me. Obviously, it was not compatible with my finance, background and career. So it was a bit tough for me to combine both worlds, but I still did a lot of videos every week for close to 10 months, committed to myself and to my surroundings, and I just created. And then the more you create, the more creativity you have, the more creative you are. So to the point of how it started with Project Olympia, when I decided to stop the YouTube, I talked to a friend of mine from south of France who has a complete different path. He's a 3-time exited founder, and he never worked for anyone. Like, he has always been his own boss technically. And I talked to him. I said, listen, I learned all those skills. I learned how to use the Adobe suite. I can edit videos. I can use Illustrator and Photoshop and all this stuff. I understand social media marketing and how the algorithms are working and all this stuff, which is very different from trading and fixed income and all these things I've been studying and doing for 10 years. How can I use those skills into something else? And he was like, listen, I'm always creating something. So if you want, you can, start with me on a certain, project, see where it goes. I started as kind of like a consultant. He needed someone who he could trust, someone who understood finance, who could potentially help at some point fundraising, someone who could manage a team, etc. So just started like giving some ideas, being involved a little bit on my free time, spare time. And then it grew more and more into having meetings over the weekends and dedicating 1 hour or 2 at the end of my day. So it started getting like a lot. Like some of my holidays were spent working on a project with him. We pivoted a few times to the point where we got a venture capital fund who told us, guys, yeah, we love what you're doing. We're happy to commit 2 million. Let's go. And when we signed the contract, I was like, okay, cool. It's now or never, right? They're gonna help us to reach this, get this money. They were backing us, and that's how I ended up resigning.
And staying with the financing part, because this is super important. How did you guys? What was your experience of securing the financing? How did you look for investors? Any tips you want to give on this front? Because obviously, if some people who are watching this want to start their own company, this is like pretty important to line this up.
So that's I think the main part of the journey is that we didn't end up securing the finance. But yet we had massive success with what we were doing. So when I resigned, we were expecting to have money coming in, but then the war started in Ukraine, and then all the venture capital funds who were warm at the time and soft committed also some money, etc., told us we can't commit anymore because you guys have a deep tech company, and deep tech is a lot of capital up front, 2-3 years of developing the project, the service or product, before being able to commercialize it. And then it's too big of a risk for investors to put money and wait for 2-3 years before knowing if their money is actually going to return something. So they started telling us, we're happy to help you finding other investors, but we can't commit the money anymore. So like, okay. And then the more we were talking to other VC funds, I talked to, I don't know, we had maybe close to 70 or 80 calls with venture capital funds and business angels, and tried to get grants from, there's some government bodies in the UK that can help you getting grants and stuff. We applied, we wasted money. So we ended up actually bootstrapping most of the project. And then when we started having a lot of traction, after pivoting a few times, we raised 50K friends and family. But it was bootstrapping mainly, money coming from myself and my co-founder. Good thing is we were both in situations where we had money in the bank account where we could, that we could dedicate to the project. So you have to be committed, right? To say, okay, I don't know if this money is going to be returning in investment, but I'm so passionate about what I'm doing that, I'll just not just commit my time, my energy, my focus and passion, but also my bank account is going all in on this project, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, and it does sound well. You guys have hit this macro developments that you couldn't really control, right? And this is something, I guess, also something to be ready for. I guess when you start your own business, there'll be simply some macro forces that are outside of what you can control and nothing you can do. And it will be tough, but yeah.
Yeah. The timing is something you can control somehow. Like if you do your market research, you can know, a competitor is about to launch this or that. So you can kind of like control a little bit the timing, but there's always a part in timing that is completely unexpected. And I didn't know when I resigned on the 8th of February 2022 that on the 23rd of February 2022 the war would start in Ukraine.
Oh God.
I had no idea, right? So that started a hell of a journey. But without this also, I wouldn't have done a lot of things that we ended up doing and pivoting and learning so much. So
yeah. And obviously you went into this AI Web 3.0 space without the background on those topics. Obviously your co-founder kind of had some experience with that, or not.
So we started with an AI company, video recognition of human movements and behavior, and we were launching it first in the sports industry. There's a lot of issues in the sport industry, and we found some gaps and problems where we could bring a solution with AI. At the time, ChatGPT and all this stuff were not a thing, right? So AI was getting traction, but not as much as today. We started with that. He had the background in AI. He had been, working in it. He's got a good position in consulting also for top universities in the UK. And we had in the team the head of the AI research lab at Oxford Uni, Oxford Brook. So we were covered on the tech side. I started though helping on the AI development. So I just learned, I started with basic stuff and I was reading a lot, etc. And then when the war started, we had to pivot. And that's where I told him, listen, what do we have? What can we do with what we have? Because there's no way I'm going back to my employer saying, hey, sorry, I made a mistake. I want to keep on going. I reached the non-return point, so let's move forward. So we decided to pivot. And that's where I had been in cryptocurrency, trading a little bit, looking, reading, spending time understanding what blockchain is for quite a few years. And I told him, listen, there might be an opportunity if we pivot slightly and go into blockchain. So we looked at what the assets we had, and we're like, okay, my business partner has a portfolio, a company with it's family business. They've got 100 properties across France and in the UK roughly, and it's a business, 28 years, it's rolling, it creates cash, etc. So I told him, what about we take a few of these properties and let's see if we can tokenize them, put them on the blockchain, and find new thing. Same again, I know nothing about real estate, it's his business, etc. But I said, well, I've got this knowledge, I've got these skills, let's combine together what we have and see if something can come out of it. So we started doing that. But then when we started talking and pitching the idea to some what we thought was the target audience, people were like, it's an amazing idea. There's a need of having the real estate market more accessible, especially now that it gets so expensive for the new generation to step on the ladder. However, blockchain, we're not sure, etc. So I'm like, okay, great. So we need to find the right target audience. It's a good idea. Let's keep on building that, because it was just like technically adding a small layer on top of an existing business. So it wasn't taking us much of our time to do so. But we said, okay, we need to find this target audience. And where are they? And these are what they call the degens. These are the nerds and geeks who started with video games or dev, coding, etc., and ended up in blockchain. And we're like, okay, these guys, what do they like? Well, they like video games, most of them. Okay, is there a gap in Web3 gaming that we could, go into? And yes, there is. There's a lot of fake, not fake, but very poorly made video games that were, being created by unknown teams, like people hiding behind avatars and stuff. And we're like, okay, if we do that, we get the best team we can, the best people with real experience in finance, tech, and video game, and we do everything. I ended up finding people who had worked at Rockstar Gaming, Ubisoft, Activision. Our script writer for the game had been involved in the scripts of Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, Marvel, so big names, big licenses, etc. Got some former clients of mine on the board of the company, so current head of trading at big banks, etc. We ended up at the peak having 45 people working on the 3 vertical. The AI, which was obviously needed self-financing because no one wanted to put money in it because of the fintech and the time it would take, but we still wanted to self-finance this. The real estate, which we knew would take a bit of time and we had to find the right audience to sell that to. But then the marketing front was this Web3 gaming. Was, okay, let's get the community, let's get the people in our ecosystem, and then let's educate them about the other options and opportunities if they trust us. We doxed ourselves, so revealed our identities, which is something at the time, it's getting a bit better now, but at the time no one was revealing their identity because most of them were scamming others. And we're like, no, we have a good reputation and career, so we are honest people, so let's do it. We put our LinkedIn, full name, everything. They found all our socials. We ended up having, at the peak, close to 40,000 people following us on Twitter. We never paid for any bots. 20,000 people on Discord. People were writing articles, etc. We got invited to more than 40, podcasts to talk about our project, and we ended up being one of the top, potential future blue chip project in NFTs and crypto gaming. Everybody was talking about us, from Japan to Australia to South America, Africa, everywhere in Europe. And so that was a successful pivot, but it was a lot of learning for my co-founder and myself. Going back to your initial questions about learning, we are, as human beings, eternal learners, and people who stop learning, in my opinion, kind of not stop living, but almost. They put aside one important part of life. So he learned about crypto, I learned about real estate and AI. We learned together, even though him and I, massive geeks. We always played video games, but there's a difference between playing video games and creating a video game. we learned about it, and we learned from the team, from people who were hiring, and that's the exciting part. You learn from others, and you keep on learning. And the more the team is growing, the more you learn, and it's just this like virtuous loop of. And we think because we're 30 plus years old that we stop learning, we can't learn more. That's so not true. We could. I'm sure you can. You can. Our brain is made to keep on learning until you potentially have a brain disease. But otherwise, I think you can keep on learning eternally.
And how transferable did you find your corporate skills to be? Because a lot of people who are in corporate roles are thinking, okay, I can only do that, and that does not have applicability to any other entrepreneurial projects that I might be interested in. So how transferable did you find your corporate skills back then on this journey as you guys were pivoting and bootstrapping and, creative things on the go,
It's such an important question because one thing that blocks most of the people to actually, take this step of creating something, creating a company and dropping their career is we think that we're not good enough. We think that we are specialized in something. But so my role, the last job I had was, my title was sales, right? And this company I was working for grew very fast, very quickly. And, the first few years were really exciting because I had everything to do. They gave me, the trust to develop the business for them. But I reached a certain cap at some point where I was not learning anything anymore. And I felt like, okay, I mastered the job, but I'm just a sales. But what I didn't realize is that I was more than a sales. I was a project manager because you sell the product, but since it's a new tech, you need the devs from your company to align with the devs of the company who's going to start using your product. They need to integrate in their internal process. When MiFID II, so finance regulation, that happened a few years back, I was going to talk to legal teams and compliance teams and talking about legal, and I don't have any legal background, so I had to talk about that. I had to go through contracts, learn about the MiFID directive and be able to talk confidently about it. I had to make sure that when I had a trader who started, trading a certain product, I was able to use data. I was able to understand their feedback, translate that to my devs to create new features. So I had a consultant hat, I had a project manager hat, I had a sales hat, and I was just like driving those different, departments, legal, dev, trading, settlement teams, back office, middle office, pretty much everything, right? So you don't realize it because you're in it, and you're like, this is my job. My title says I'm sales, so I'm sales. And then you start creating your thing, and you're like, oh, well, but that's easy. Yes, I have to talk with marketing. I have to find a marketing team. I have to work on the budget, the finance. I have to find an idea for my dev who has an issue there. I had to talk with an investor. I had to create a pitch deck. And you're like, well, I've done presentations. I created events. I talked to, all these people. So it's actually, it's fine. I've done that actually. And that's when I realized, well, I'm a lot more than just a sales. I can do a lot of things, and it's in the interest of a company to control what you're doing, right? They pay you just well enough to keep you involved in doing your job, but they don't necessarily they don't want everyone to come up with ideas to say, oh, we should drive the business this way, that way, etc. It's their job, and they don't want you to do it. So they pay you just well enough in finance, so you stay, you're happy, but you feel like you're never good enough, so you keep on pushing even more the next year to have a bit more money, etc., especially in finance. And you're in this vicious loop where you're like, gosh. So breaking out of it was the hardest. And then once you're in this like new role and creating your own stuff, that's where you realize, gosh, but all these years I accumulated skills, and I can do a lot of other things. So transferable skills, it's hard when you're in it to understand where they are, what they are. But once you start doing it, that's where you really understand that, oh, well, actually, I know so much.
And can you describe while you were within this, deep in this entrepreneurial journey, can you compare your life then to your employment life? Like, what was more exciting and rewarding? What was more challenging? So that people who are still kind of in the corporate world can see what the other side looks like.
The other side is I would recommend hands down to everyone who is creative and wants to create something to live what I've lived, even though the ending was not as expected. Yet the journey is not over. But I would recommend to leave that. I was waking up in the morning before my alarm, and I was like, okay, what's happening today? What are we going to create? Oh yeah, there's an issue. Great. Well, a problem is just an opportunity to find a new solution and to evolve and to maybe pivot at some point. Pivoting is the hardest thing. When I had this, the first entrepreneur and potential investor I pitched my social network platform to, and he's been a mentor for me. I worked for him in one of his startup during my studies, and he always told me, don't fall in love with the idea, fall in love with success. Meaning, if you've got an idea but then market happens, things happen in the industry, and your idea is not good anymore, it wasn't good to start with, it's fine, just pivot, keep on evolving, keep on changing your company until you make it. And that was the exciting part, because you never really know what's going to happen. As frustrating as it can be sometimes, it's also the exciting part, because you have to solve those things. And as COO, my role was to help my CEO to drive the business forward, but I was kind of like the Swiss knife of the company. So what was rewarding was feeling that you have a direct impact, and obviously you listened, and when you see it's working, you've got an idea, you test this idea with your team, and they say, okay, let's try it, and then it becomes a product or a service. That's super rewarding. You've got an idea in your shower, you're like, oh, let's try that, and it becomes a product, or it's even like a small detail on a website or a feature, and you're like, wow, that came from me when I was under the shower. That's super fun. Challenging is it's good also, but it never stops. Once it's in your head, I had insomnia sometimes, and over the weekend, you just think about it all the time. Everything you do brings you new ideas, because now you've got all this free time to think. You're not like on a schedule that is pushed by a corporate. You've got your own schedule, so your creativity just kicks in, and you're like, oh, I've got this idea, that idea. So I was taking notes all the time, waking up in the middle of the night, typing in my notes, saying, oh, I shouldn't forget that. So it never stops. It's great. It's super exciting, but at the same time also it's draining. It's quite tiring. But that was the good part. And another challenge obviously is like, if you don't get investors, and we were bootstrapping and we were creating in a bear market, in a market where I had no liquidity. Even the biggest private equity companies were struggling to raise capital. No one was deploying capital in 2022, 2023. It was very, very hard. So that you've got this one shot. That time is ticking, and if your money and ideas and team is not working together in the right direction, then it might be the end of the journey. So the challenge was like, don't think too much about the worst case scenario, which every day that you spend working on it is getting closer if you don't have a big success, a big win at some point.
And what implications does it have on intensity of the work and work-life balance? Because again, for people who have never tried to run their own entrepreneurial project, it may be not super clear, like, what does entrepreneurial life look like? Do you work more? Do you work less? Like, what does this aspect look like?
You work a lot more. To my previous point, you always work, technically, weekends. And when you've got some deadlines, because obviously you start having partnerships, you start having, you commit to other companies to develop certain things. So we had certain specific deadlines sometimes. And then I remember one big deadline when we wanted to launch the game. I had a few people in my team, potentially I think what was like 3 or 4 nights in a row where I didn't slept. I had naps of like 30 minutes, maybe 1 hour. that was a specific event, right? But we wanted to launch on a specific date, and we're like, okay, well, we have to do all this stuff. But otherwise, forget the 8 to 10 hours per day. It can be, sometimes you can say, hey, okay, today I'll take it easy. I'm going to work just 4 hours. You need that to get some brain cells back and get creative again, and sometimes find a solution to a problem. So some days it's going to be, you can decide not to work, but then it's going to be 12, 14, 16 hours, depending how fast you're going, how much budget you have. But when you bootstrap, you work 3 times more than potentially someone who has, secured the funding already and who's a bit more relaxed and has a capital to deploy over 2-3 years. They can relax a bit more, although even these people, obviously, now they've got different type of pressure because they've got money coming from investors, right? So I think entrepreneurs in general, you work a lot more, but you love what you're doing, so you don't count. It doesn't feel like working. That's I think the main message is it's not working.
Yeah, but it also kind of goes to show that I guess your partner, your relationships kind of, there should be some adjustment of expectations of how much time you can dedicate to them, which is why probably it's difficult to do something like that if like you have a family and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a moment to do it, although I know a lot of successful entrepreneurs who also did it with a family. But I think those people who succeed to do it with a family, it's not the first time they're doing it. They tried several times, so they know what to do, how to do it, to make it so it can work together with a family. Now, obviously, it's not impossible to do it when you've got a family, but yes, it is definitely a lot harder. I was lucky enough to be with, so I am with, my girlfriend, who's also in this like entrepreneurship. She's got her own company, so she understand that, she works with venture capital, she works with startups and stuff. She is a founder herself, so I was lucky that she was on the same wavelength as me, so I didn't have the argument of, yeah, well, you've been working so long, etc. She was like, fine, you work, then I work also, and then let's keep sometimes over the weekend together to be together. But if you've got someone who is not a founder, who's not an entrepreneur and has a 9-to-5 job, then yes, that could be hard also. So surrounding yourself with the right people is super important. And when it comes to relationship, it can be a make it or break it type of deal, right? So yeah, it's the risk. It's part of the risks, unfortunately, and hopefully for people who wants to start that, the best thing to do is obviously have a chat first, also with your partner, and say, listen, this is what I want to do. Are you going to be supportive, because this is going to be hard, right? And I can't even guarantee the success of it, right? So will you follow me? Will you understand, when I'm up and down? Because the ups are very, very high and the downs are very, very low. So will you be there?
And on that, can you tell me a bit more about the time when you realized, so you were in the middle of the venture, bootstrapping, building out the game. So at which point did you realize that it's not working out as expected?
So for us, it was very abrupt because we had massive hype, a lot of traction, etc. And it just came down to investment, unfortunately, because we were bootstrapping. And we kept on talking to venture capital fund. We were backed by a VC who committed to invest in the later stage once we would have launched some stuff, etc. But the thing is, we needed capital upfront also. But because the liquidity was so poor, VC funds were not investing anymore. So we were like, okay, let's launch the game with the players, the users, etc. We found another investor, who business angel, who committed 1.2 million. And the day of the signature of the term sheet, we had the news that his company was impacted by the collapse of FTX. So there goes another $1.2 million. And we're like, okay, great. Tried to find another one, found another one, but this guy was impacted then by the Silicon Valley Bank. It was like in baseball, 3 strikes and technically you're out. But we did also try to launch the game, but we ended up having, unfortunately, a technical issue. Our blockchain dev ended up with COVID. during the Christmas period at the hospital under respiratory device and stuff, and we got some delay on the coding of the smart contract. He came back. It was very stressful for us because how do you put pressure on someone who's at the hospital? You feel like it's not human, but at the same time you've been working for 3 years on a company. It's close to launch. And like, well, what do we do, right? Long story short, there was an issue in not the smart contract, but the link between the website and the database, and we missed out on $1 million live in front of us. We had 22,000 people the day of the launch of the game who were on our website to buy the NFTs, NFT collection. We would have sold out, and that represented $1 million of sales. Something went wrong in the connection between the website and smart contract, etc. But this was not his fault. He worked so hard, so much. It took me a bit of time also to accept this, but it was, if we had funding to start with, we could have supported him properly. We could have have a proper team to help this guy. He coded the smart contract well. He just did a tiny small mistake. He forgot to update a folder which takes 30 seconds to update, and that cost us $1 million on one tiny mistake. So to your point, to your question, is we didn't see it coming. We were at the top. The 2 days before launch, we had a podcast with like 3,000 people listening to us live from all over the world: China, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, America, Africa. Everyone was there waiting for this. We were very, very hyped. All the big YouTubers in this space were talking about us. So it was that was a very difficult part. We didn't see it coming, because that's the thing. Also, if you see something not working the way you want it to work, which it did from the AI beginning to the Web3 gaming, we kept on pivoting because we knew things were not working. So you kept on changing. I don't know, when someone tells me, oh, do you have a pitch deck? I'm like, which one? Which version of the pitch deck do you want? I'm at version 35 right now, right? You keep on changing. So we didn't see it coming, and that was the very tough point to accept. Funding was not there. 3 times in a row, we got millions of dollars of commitment that just like disappeared, vanished. And then we had the technical issue, which would not have happened if it wasn't for the funding. So that was a hard one to stomach.
And how was this time for you personally? How did you deal with this on an emotional level?
I for a few months was clinically depressed. Because you go from working so much for technically 3 years in a row, like 1.5 years overlapping when I was with my former employer, to 1.5 to 2 years working nonstop on this, and you go from working on average 14 hours a day and weekends to nothing, because you have to shut down. You have to tell to your team, the 45 people at the time who was working, also putting time and efforts, etc. You have to tell them, guys, runway is getting thin. We have to shut down, take the hard decision to shut everything, and it's outside of our control, most of it, and it's not your fault. The hard part for me was when you start a company, when you decide to become an entrepreneur, you do it selfishly for you. You want to have financial freedom. You want to act on your creativity. You want to change your life. But then as people join you on the path, on this journey, and they believe in you, they believe in your ambition, in your vision, etc., and they follow you, you start doing it for them too. You start doing it for your team. You want to make them happy. And the people I did in the team are people I really still respect a lot and really like, and people who are genuine. So having to deliver the news was very hard, and I felt like I failed them. I was okay for myself. I was like, I've got a good degree, good studies. Now I know even more. I'll find something. I'll be fine. Financially speaking, it's tough because obviously I had debt, and I was like, okay, I need to repay friends and family now. But it was fine. I've done it in the past, repaid a student loan. It's okay. But it was more like these other people. And the thing that took me down is also the thing that brought me back on track is a few months later when people started, digesting they came back to me and sorry, I always get emotional on that. Some of them told me, listen, if it wasn't for you, I would have never understood what I was capable of. You pushed me to do things that I was pushing back to start with, and I was like, I don't know how to do that. And I was like, yes, you can do it. Find a way, you're gonna do it. And they came back saying, I learned so much with you, thanks to the initiative, and what we created was so inspiring, was so good, and now I know I can do so much more. And funnily enough, yesterday, I had one of this person who was my community manager / marketing / sales / a lot of things, because he posted on LinkedIn and he talked about this adventure because last week he succeeded to raise like $10 million for a client in his new company. And he dedicated this success technically to our game and our adventure, saying if it wasn't for what I learned there and then with the team, maybe I wouldn't have done that today. And that was, I came back on track and recovered from this depression, and I was like, okay, I've done something good, not just for myself but also these people. I didn't kill their career or anything. They learned from it and they were grateful from it. So that that helped me keep on going.
And how about yourself? What have you learned about yourself through this experience?
I learned that I'm tougher than I think I was. I think I learned that I can keep on learning even more. I was at the point in my career where I felt stuck. I was like in a certain product in finance, and for people who are watching who are in finance, I was, in fixed income. And I was like, well, it's very hard once you've got so many years in a certain product. It's hard to jump from fixed income to equity or FX or structured products or whatever. Once you're in a certain category after a lot of, years, you can't become, I was in algorithmic and trading venue, you can't become all of a sudden a portfolio manager. You don't have the track record, you don't have this and that. So changing path at some point, you're like, it's getting harder and harder. And also financially speaking, it's tough. So I felt stuck. I unstuck myself by following my guts, and because I wanted to be creative. And I think that's one thing I learned is that, when I felt stuck and I thought I was just good at that was a big lie. That society wants you to believe in, and corporates might want you to believe in. And then once you're on this like entrepreneurship path and journey, you're like, well, actually, sky is the limit. As long as I put the time, effort into it, I can do it. So that's what I learned is I know I can learn anything. Just if I commit myself to it, I can learn anything.
And we started our conversation with the fact that I've mentioned that you found these years to be one of the most rewarding years of your life. Can you speak a bit more about that? What made this experience so special and so meaningful to you?
I enjoyed life a lot more. As I said earlier, I woke up, I was excited about what would happen. I felt like what I was doing had an impact on, I was creating, and I was from idea under the shower to product and service, and you can see it. I knew all the steps to go from idea to, product, which you don't necessarily see when you're in a big corporate because you're so focused on a specific task most of the time. So you don't see the whole chain. But here I was managing the whole chain. So that was very, very fulfilling. And even though I was working so much, it didn't feel like work. So I was, I felt like I was not working technically. And that was the most, fulfilling part is you go through, the year without seeing the year going, and you're like, gosh, I've done so many things, and it's so rewarding. And then when you start having impact on others, that's another layer. That's another level where you're like, okay, I'm doing something not just for me anymore, but for also others, and I do impact their lives a little bit. And it's maybe ego a little bit, but it does, it does help also with happiness when you know that you've got a positive impact on other people. So.
Many people who have experienced entrepreneurial journey have said that at this moment in life they felt most alive. Is it something that you would agree with and can relate to?
Yes, I felt I was on a specific track where family, society pushed me on. I went off track. I'm still off track, but journey is not over. And that's what is exciting. It's life. I don't know where it's gonna lead. There's new projects now coming my way. I'm working for this company with people who have this entrepreneurial mindset. I love working with them. They're great, and they empower me also. They think the same way, and you enjoy life a lot more when you're with similar people, and when you know that the unexpected, good or bad, you'll deal with it. It's fine.
Thank you, Marc. This conversation means a lot to me, and I hope I personally have learned a lot about the human potential, resilience, and how we should never think of us as in a narrow way, but we're much bigger than that, and we will see how kind of big and capable we are once the circumstances require us to be like that.
Great. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to share a bit of my journey, which is not over, right? But maybe there will be another episode next year. Who knows?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's aim for that. That's the next milestone.
Perfect. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
Really nice.